25 grams of water, putting in 100% hydration. Kind of looks like that now. All right, so let's mix this together. Pulling away from the sides, make a little. Okay, gooey. All right, let's put a pinch of yeast in there. I'm going to use my scale, and we'll try to estimate what this is. With a measuring spoon. We'll see how this comes out. Not a lot. You see, it's basically just going to be about what I thought it was going to be, about a pinch. Not a lot of that's about it. It's about a pinch. I put it a 1/4 teaspoon, but I'll see how that does. Is that about 1/3 of a 1/4 teaspoon? I don't know. As I've said, I don't really use measuring spoons very often. Let's mix all that together. All right. Get that mixed together really well. Chose a container that can at least quadruple in size. I don't really care how much it expands. I'm really just letting it start to ferment a little bit, because we're going to leave this on the counter for anywhere from 12 to 18 hours. It's currently 10:30 in the morning here, and I plan to do this bake tomorrow, probably around 6 a.m. or so. So yeah, that will give it a good at least 20 hours, which should probably be sufficient. Don't want to let it go for more than 24. Just cover it with this bit of plastic wrap, which is far simpler. And then I always put a little tag on it when it started. So it's 10:33 a.m. So we'll put this down and just let this sit for till tomorrow morning, and we'll go on with the rest of the mix. Now we're ready to put the whole thing together now. It's been about 24 hours, which is probably about 6 hours longer than necessary on the Poolish, but it's looking really good. You can see that it's got quite a bit of strength to it, actually, after sitting for 24 hours. This is whole wheat flour. Had we used the white flour to make the Poolish, this would have just be as elastic as it can be. Anyway, this looks really good. If you smell it, it's got a nice yeasty smell to it. But yeah, I think it's good. That's going to work out really well. Already put all the flour into the bowl. Got about 200 grams of bread flour in here. The rest of the whole wheat flour, which is about 75 grams, and the 35 grams of dry milk. So we're just going to put that in there. Don't even have to mix it up. In here, I've mixed together. I've got about 8 grams of salt. I use kosher salt, but table salt works just as well. As I said, if you're going to use a measuring spoon, use fine grained table salt. 8 grams of salt is about a teaspoon of fine grained salt. And then it's got put 9.15 grams of yeast in here. That's just a little less than the original recipe because, as you remember, I put 1/4 of a gram in the Poolish. It doesn't really much matter. So if you put 2.25 teaspoons of yeast in, that'd be fine. It's not going to make that huge of a difference, so we're just going to add that in. And again, doesn't have to be fancy at all. Next, let's just put the rest as we did before. We'll just put the liquid ingredients in. I prefer to put the liquid ingredients in and then put the Poolish on top before I mix it together. So let's just measure out the liquid ingredients. And again, as you're going to hear me talk about over and over and over again, measuring liquid ingredients is a heck of a lot easier than doing it with volume measures. Milk, we had 130 grams of milk. So put up, I already measured that out. It should be about 130 grams. Yeah. And then 25 grams of, this is canola oil. You can actually, in some of my heartier breads, I use olive oil rather than canola oil. You just need any sort of vegetable fat. That's fine. About 25 grams of this in. And then honey, I use all sorts of honeys. I get this here. You can use clover honey or any sort of honey you can get locally. Works just as well. I put 40 grams in. I find 40 grams per 500 grams of flour works about pretty well. I'm not overly concerned about this. Keeping in mind, though, that honey is about 20% water. So if you go overboard with it, you can really kind of increase the hydration level of your roll mix. Anyway, looks like kind of a mess, but it's going to work out pretty slick. Before we put the Poolish in, let's start mixing this together a little bit. I just use this bowl scraper. Some people use their fingers. Some people use a spatula. I happen to like the bowl scraper just because it's wide. It conforms to the size of the bowl. So I just kind of scrape the edges off and kind of move the liquids into the middle. I had to start to get it mixed up a little bit. I want to do this so that when I add the Poolish, it'll all come together nicely. All right. So we'll just sort of get this wetted down a little bit. And we'll scrape that off of there. And now let's just kind of put the Poolish in. Now, one thing I'm going to do here, this has been sitting around longer than I wanted. Let's measure how heavy this is. It should be about 250 grams, because we had 125 grams of flour and 125 grams of water. But it's been sitting on the counter for now a little over 24 hours. So it may have lost some of its water content. So let's see where it's at. Yeah, see, it's at 240 grams. So it's lost about 10 grams of water so far. And that's going to make our bread way too dry. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add the water back in again. We'll take the same colander we used for the. We'll just add a few more grams of water here. Get this up back up to the 250 where it started. And all right. So now we got the right water content, and now that that's done, let's just mix this together, just like we did before when we were just mixed everything together at the front end. You're going to see it's going to come together just about the same. I still find this one of the most fascinating parts of baking. And you start with all these random ingredients and start mushing them together, and it really starts to form into something. So, you see what I'm doing? I'm just trying to get all the ingredients that were in there just kind of together. I'm not really trying to do any real agitation of it, but you see I'm just sort of folding it in to make a ball. Now, there we go. That's pretty good. All right, so this is, scrape this off. Now, if we try to manipulate this right now, it's going to stick like mad, I would imagine. So if you see, if I just touch this, yeah, it just sticks in my fingers mercifully. And there's no really gluten development, it just breaks up as soon as you touch it. So, like we did before, I'm going to cover this, and I'm just going to let it sit. Go through what's called an autolyse. Now, normally what I would do is let it autolyse for about 30 minutes and then start doing it again. I'm going to check this at 30 minutes to see how it is. But I'm sure I'm going to let it go longer. All right, so let's just cover this with a wet towel. So we're just going to take just a wet tea towel and cover it again using a wet tea towel just to keep it from drying out the time it's going to sit here on the counter. And then we'll just take a timer and we'll just start a timer. Let us see what it does. And just sit, and gotta move on to another bread for a while, but we'll be back with this. So now we're about 31 minutes in. Let's have a look at this, see how we're doing. And again, back to my bowl scraper, and let's just kind of see if we got some gluten development going on here. So we got a little bit, still pretty sticky. Kind of form it. And if we were to, let's see. You see, it's looking, falls apart really quick. It's not really formed anything yet. It's still really sticking really bad to our hands. Could take it out now and start to knead, but let's just let nature do the work. And form this back up in a little ball. Now let it sit a little bit longer. Scrape that off of there. And I'll cover it back up and see what happens. Let's give it at least another 30 minutes. Alright, so it's about an hour 40 now. Let's have a look to see how we're doing. Well, looks better. Starting to come together. Let's see how sticky this is. It's worth trying to knead right now, or do we wait even longer? You can see it's not as some flour on our fingers. Let's see what it does. It's starting to hold together, even with 50%. Just amazing. 50% whole wheat flour. Yeah, it's good. Gluten structure a lot better than it was. But we need this now. Tell you what, I get exercise in kneading wet doughs. Scraper, let's get this out of here. Let's get our fingers a little bit of light dusting on the surface. See how this does. Oh yeah, this is fine. So we're just going to use a standard. Let's watch the time on this. Should take, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes or so. Okay. So we're going to stop this. We're not going to do it again. We'll clear it and we'll just start, just get an idea how long it does take to knead this again, and what your kneading technique is. It could take you longer, it could take you less. We're just really trying to get this together as a dough. You can feel it's it's kind of cool. It's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment. So it's still pretty tacky. So we're just gonna keep a light dusting on the work surface here. Yeah, it's 8 minutes. Let's see how we're doing in 8 minutes. And this looks pretty nice, really. I think we can declare victory. Yeah, it looks nice. Yeah, I think we're pretty much there. Okay, it's 9 minutes. Good place to stop. So like I said, not really doing a strict window pane test. I don't really believe in that, so to speak, because it really depends on what you want your crumb to look like. I'm just really looking to see if I've got decent gluten development. And this has got 50% whole wheat in it, so it's not going to look like a baguette. But just kind of, again, make sure your fingers are floured so they don't tear it. Just kind of pick a piece up and just sort of slowly pull from the middle. And I'm not pulling from the end, I'm just kind of trying to pull the middle apart just to kind of see how the gluten forms. And it really stretching nicely without breaking at all. Overall, it's got a nice feel to it. So we're gonna let this, the thing I do is I do this with it. Just form a ball. You see how the surface can get nice and taut? It's got good gluten development. Stop that and clear it. I've got a simple bulk fermentation container. It's an old food container from the 90s, I think. I've had it for a long time. Used to use the tape method, where you just stick a piece of tape on, draw on the edges where I want to rise to. I've switched over to use the rubber band method, which is a hell of a lot easier. I just stick a little olive oil, and this is just straight up olive oil. It's not Mr. Fancy Pants extra virgin olive oil. Just kind of spritz the inside of that. Take the dough, kind of pound it down a little bit. And you're going to be shocked to see that this is already pretty much where the top of the dough is. And just kind of put this around where the top of the dough is. So we're going to put the top on. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for an hour, and then we're going to do 1 or 2 folds on it just to, again, finish up the gluten development before we really start the bulk fermentation. So we're going to set the timer to 1 hour, hit the start button, and set this aside. Let this now sit for an hour. You can see it's actually already doubled in volume. And it's pretty active. I didn't expect it to be quite that active. But let's just give it. You know what? This looks like it's pretty good the way it is. We're gonna. I don't know that we need to. Okay. All right, so we're going to fold it and fold it, fold it, fold it. Roll this into a ball. This is really good shape now. Yeah, I was going to try to do a business letter fold on this and then let it finish rising, but it's pretty active and pretty darn elastic the way it is. I'm just going to shape this and put it into 8.5 inch bread pan. First we're going to do, we're just going to pre-shape this. So pre-shave it, just kind of push it out, kind of form it into a little ball just by pulling in the edges like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just kind of rotate it and pull, tuck it under while you're doing that. Just form a little ball. And then you take that wet tea towel again, which you had earlier, and just cover that up. Let's just let that sit for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. There we go. That will give the gluten time to relax a little bit. Let's prep this. I just use vegetable shortening to prep my pans. It's like a lot of things, that bakers do, like not mixing salt when they initially put in their yeast, or and other things that don't really seem to matter one way or the other. It makes people happy. I've been doing this ever since it's got a loaf stuck in a pan. Loaf been stuck in the pan since, so keep doing it. Doesn't take but a second. There we go. Okay, you're almost there. Got our pan prepped. Just put that down there. This goes off. Let's get that cleared. Put that over here. Here's our loaf. Again, 8 tea towels optional. This looks pretty darn good. All right, shape it. Top side down like we had it. Just kind of stretch this out a little bit. I use my fingertips. Again, there's a zillion ways to do this. And take this, fold this towards the center like that. Kind of press it down a little bit. Take the other side, fold it towards the center. Press it. It doesn't have to be perfect again. Just sort of seal it down the middle. Again, not perfect. I always just turn it sideways. Kind of flare the back end out a little bit. You can see it's about the width of this 8.5 inch pan. Take the top, fold the top over about a third of the way down. Stick your thumbs in, push, because you're starting to get some tension on this. Roll it up a little bit, pull, push and pull, push and pull. You can see that it's expanding as I do that. Push, 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 until the seam is down. Then you can kind of pull the ends a little bit. And then I kind of scooch it back and forth. And then just put in pan. Like that. Again, does not have to be perfect. So at the end of the day, what we're going to end up with is we're going to let this rise here in the pan until it's about 1.5 inches up off the rim. You can kind of see the way it's sitting in the pan right now. It's sort of like just level with the rim. So it's going to rise up about yay much. I get real anal about the whole thing. Actually got a steel ruler that I've had forever. But so we're going to go about 1.5 inches, about that much above the rim. So when it's all done, it's going to sit up about like that. So it's going to, again, be about this high, and then we're going to put it in the oven and bake it. So again, we're just going to, use a little bit of clear plastic wrap on this. Pull a little bit out. Put it here. And half the time this actually works. That's not going to work. So I'll just take a serrated knife and just cut this off like that. Move forward. I'm going to take a little olive oil, spray a little olive oil on, just so it keeps the top moist. Again, there's a million ways to do this. And we're just going to let this sit for probably until, I think probably about 45 to 50 minutes to an hour to do this. So we're going to set our timer again to 45 minutes just to remind us to do something so we don't overdo it. So we'll get that started. And then while that's doing that thing, we're going to just turn our oven on to 350 and get that preheated so it's ready to go when it's done. So we're just going to, again, set this aside and wait till it gets up to about an inch and a half, and then we're going to bake. All right, this is ready to go. It's been a little over an hour or so. But that's all going to depend on how hot your oven is. Excuse me, how it's been sitting here for about an hour. You can see it's about 1.5 inches across the top. How long it will take to rise in your kitchen will depend on the temperature of your kitchen and the humidity. It's about 70 degrees, 71 degrees today here. It's a little on the cool side. So we can cover it. Looking pretty good overall. So we're going to move this over to the oven and put the water in the steam pan and get her baking. Oven is preheated to 350 degrees. Got about a cup of water preheated in the microwave. Doesn't have to be too exact. Put that on top of the oven. Take the loaf in the center of the oven. Pull the pan out. That in there. Close that up. Set the timer for 20 minutes. Here we go. Let it bake. All right. Let's see how this is doing. That's got a nice color to it. It's about 195 degrees. That looks good. Let's take a pan.